Thank you. I am Jonathan Teller-Elsberg, so very quickly, running through the basic meat of this. Generally, we're talking about the energy cost burden, what fraction of a household's income is going towards buying energy supplies. And if you have a high energy burden, then that puts you in a situation that we're calling fuel poverty. We did not invent the term. It's an existing term. And specifically, if the household is spending more than 10% of its income on the household energy, then that's a working definition for fuel poverty. So what? Obviously, there's what Paul Zabriskie talked about. You got to balance. What do you've got limited money. What are you going to spend it on? Staying warm, getting enough food, medicine, those sorts of things. Specifically, in a cold climate such as ours, when people are in fuel poverty, there are a lot of significant increased health risks. Obviously, it's going to be worse for at-risk populations, elderly, those who have underlying health conditions, stroke, heart attack, influenza, pneumonia, asthma, household accidents, a lot of really serious things. And you put it all together, and you've got a problem of excess winter mortality. People who die during the cold time of the year because the cold temperatures are making things worse. And this is specifically narrowed to that fuel poverty. The social scientists have been able to kind of disaggregate the different things that are happening. Fuel poverty is a direct contributor to excess winter mortality. And by our estimates, in Vermont, it's an average of 172 people dying per year as a result of their fuel poverty, which, as reference, is twice as many deaths per year as happen from automobile and other transportation accidents. So there are three basic factors that go into it. What's the household income? What is the price of the energy that they are using? And how much of the energy are they using? And in general, the study ran from 2000 to 2012. Income, as you may well know, for all but the top decile has been stagnant. At the bottom decile, slightly falling. Very slightly. The price of energy, electricity has been basically flat, inflation adjusted, average for Vermont. And for the fossil fuels, heating oil, propane, natural gas, the trend has been upward. Obviously with, any one year it kind of blips around, but the trend is up. More so for heating oil and propane than natural gas, but natural gas too. And there's been very little change over the whole state in terms of the quantity of energy being used by households, these kinds of energy. So you put it all together. This graph may not be, instantly understandable at first. What this shows, each line, the bottom 5 lines is representing a decile, a 10% slice of households by income. The first decile, the poorest decile, is the black line at the bottom, going up with more income. The upper 5 income deciles, I simply combined them because they all looked really quite similar. So that's why at the top it says 6th to 10th combined. And the lower you are on this graph, the worse your energy cost burden. The larger the fraction of your annual income you're spending on energy. And on the left side, you're starting in the year 2000. You can see the trend has been, as we move through to 2012, the trend has been increasing energy cost burdens. Again, incomes are stagnant. The quantity of energy being used is holding roughly steady, increasing prices. You do that calculation, you're going to get increasing cost burdens. And the dashed line marks the threshold of crossing into this category, fuel poverty. At the beginning, only the first decile, on average, qualified as being in fuel poverty. By 2012, the bottom 3 deciles, so on average, the bottom 30% of Vermont households were in fuel poverty. And if you project this out, if the lines continued exactly like this, in 2029, the 4th decile would cross the threshold. Here's another way of looking at it. This is for 2012. What fraction of each decile was in fuel poverty? So for the first decile, the poorest 10% of households, 72% are in fuel poverty. The situation obviously gets worse, but you can see you can be well above the poverty line. And the poverty line is approximately there. It's different definitions, but they match reasonably well. Between the second and third is approximately the official, poverty line. You can be in the fifth decile, and you have 20% of that decile. Those households are in fuel poverty. It really stretches well beyond generic official definitions of poverty. So, and I'm going to pass it off to Emily to talk about our recommendations for addressing this. Yes?
Could you say something real brief in terms of when you're talking about the people in different levels of poverty, about how benefits they may be receiving for energy or other things count or don't count in terms of that, not the whole explanation.
Well, when we measure their energy burden, we're measuring how much money are they spending on household energy. Does not include gasoline or diesel, only energy in the house. How much money are they spending compared to their total annual income? And that total annual income, in the survey data that we use from the Census Bureau, includes any cash benefits.
Okay. So now that we have a better picture of what situation we're in terms of energy poverty, I have a couple of recommendations that the legislature might want to take on board based on the research that we've conducted, and I did a series of interviews along with another colleague with stakeholders all around Vermont to see if the recommendations that we were preparing would be useful. So I got a lot of feedback, and I hope that these recommendations are taken on board. The first, of course, is weatherization assistance programs. They're tried and true throughout the literature. They've proven results, and we estimate that for every $1 spent, the return is $2.51. That's $1.80 in costs that were not incurred. So energy savings is $1.80. And then other costs that are not fuel related, having to do with health, safety, and increased employment, is 71 cents. So the benefits are tangible, and this is a very good investment. Low-income households tend to be the oldest and least efficient housing, so this is a really especially good place to do the weatherization assistance. In order to fund the program, please consider using the gross receipts tax on fuel. Right now it is only 0.5%, and we recommend strongly that you increase that gradually to at least 2%. The waiting list for weatherization assistance, depending on which of the action groups you speak with, is somewhere between 18 and 24 months. People want weatherization assistance, and they're waiting in line to get it. The problem is the funding. The second recommendation, because weatherization is a solution, but the benefits accrue over time. We can't weatherize everyone by tomorrow, so I strongly recommend, or we strongly recommend, that the legislature continue to supplement federal low-income housing energy assistance program. That's the LIHEAP program, because it's an important safety net that addresses the harshest burdens of those in fuel poverty. And our third recommendation is a mandatory label for housing to disclose energy efficiency. There has been a working group, many of you may have seen that there's an energy disclosure committee, and we fully support the conclusions that they came to in their report, and we would also take it a step further and say a mandatory label for rental housing would be useful both for tenants and landlords, as there's a split incentive, or there's a problem essentially where renters hesitate or have little incentive to make the energy efficiency improvement to a place that they might not have control over, and they may not stay there to reap the benefits of the energy savings. Vice versa, a landlord has little incentive to make energy efficiency infrastructure improvements where the tenant gets the benefit of the energy savings on the bill end. So to sort of try to remedy that split incentive, a housing label for rental housing could indicate to buyers how much they could spend when they're going into a lease agreement or when they're looking for housing, and their interest in getting a more efficient rental unit should spur the market and put a bit of competition for landlords to compete and make the infrastructure improvements. It will, setting an energy label as well for the state would also in the future allow Vermont to set a minimum energy efficiency floor in the future if they wish to do so. So again, those recommendations are increased funding for the weatherization assistance programs, continued funding to supplement the federal LIHEAP funds, and a mandatory label for rental housing and housing for owners. Thank you so much.